This is a short excerpt of the Economics Happy Hour podcast that I co-host with Jadrian Wooten. If you like what you see here, please consider finding us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or you could go to the Economics Happy Hour YouTube channel. All of that will be linked in the description. Hope you enjoy the video.
A private school.
Well, I mean, as long as it didn't change the net amount of teachers, I'm not 100% that would, unless they can figure out some alternative way. But I mean, so I guess we could back up a little bit. That every state who proposes it might have a different idea, but the general idea, I guess, on a school voucher, I assume most people would understand, have an idea. But in case you don't, everybody pays taxes essentially to the public schools. If you have kids, they may go then to the public schools for no monetary cost. They go for free. If you would like to send your kid somewhere else, you still pay your taxes that go to fund the public schools, but then you also have to pay extra. You pay whatever the other school would want. What a school voucher plan, once again, it could be a million varieties, but the general idea is you would, if you decide not to send your kid to the public school, because if you sent them to the public school, there'd be some cost for them going, you would instead receive a voucher for some amount. Often it's less than the average amount per student, whether it's less than the marginal amount, the additional amount that's, once again, it could vary based on how you set things up. You could receive some voucher that could offset the payment to another institution. So I think that's a general working definition of that. And even within Pennsylvania, which doesn't have a full voucher system, there are ways you can opt out to do cyber schooling.
Right.
Which
I think I've heard of the cyber school, at least in Pennsylvania, I've heard of that part.
Yeah. Which I don't know of the evidence on it. I know that some people who are huge cyber school proponents would say it's amazing. I've heard a number of people say the quality is not necessarily there, but I can't speak to be an expert on that. But then there are a number of states that have passed this. So I think that's a good general working definition for vouchers.
So I'll chime in with my first question then. Would it apply to like homeschooling? So if I were to take my kids and not school them at all, could I get a voucher to essentially fund my teaching of my child?
So this is the weird part where like any given state could set up any given
could do
rule.
it. Okay.
I do not believe that is in the rules.
That's not like a common component.
Not that I know of. And part of the idea is, Milton Friedman was really big on discussing school vouchers, even back like in the 60s. I believe it is part of Capitalism and Freedom in that book, which was a 61 release. The kind of a key component, if you want to set it up right, you've got to make sure that you don't have a parent who can then like end up pocketing money by doing wrong by their kid, right? That's one thing that they try to say. And I think homeschooling might violate that.
Okay. So I guess, right, like I would add on to it, right? And again, I'm going to go back to, I don't know anything about it. So if I'm absolutely wrong, right, throw me under the bus. So I guess another con then would be this sort of inequality type situation where if the private schools are better, you are taking people who can afford to take their kids out and move them into a private school. So you might exacerbate that issue if we already assume the private schools are better. Then we're lowering public school and the people left behind are getting a worse education, right? So you sort of have this inequality type. So
you could argue that, although I suspect that we would actually see the opposite, because I think wealthy families are already sending their kids to private schools.
Right.
A lot, not all, of course, but a lot are. This opens up the opportunity for those who, can't afford $10,000 a year for their two kids, but maybe could afford $1,000 a year per kid for their two kids to move into a different school district. So I think on net it would decrease. It might decrease that. What my biggest worry, like, and I'm generally pretty pro market on this. I think we should be more of a, I don't know, voucherized is the right verb, but this is going to sound really horribly condescending, but any parents who literally just don't care enough to think about it and do it, those kids would be the ones who are quote unquote stuck in a public school.
Right.
And to that extent, if you're already starting out with parents who literally don't care enough to do anything on this front, to invest the time and knowledge to figure out what to do for their kids. They're probably already starting a little bit behind. And then these are the ones who are, and then they're still in the school with only the other kids who are in the same boat. So I do see a little bit. I think it opens up more opportunities for those who have lower and middle incomes to afford.
Okay. So I guess the only other portions would be, right, so it'd be funding of public schools in general. Right. So if this money is sort of reallocated, you have high school, middle school campuses that are built for a certain population size, right, require some sort of maintenance upkeep, that I guess essentially you would not have the funds for that. So I would think about it in a sense of like a subsidization type program, right?
Yeah.
Like you have wealthier students subsidizing the bus system, for example, right? They may not be taking the bus, but they're going to that school. So some of that money is going towards helping busing to bring students in. So you might lose some of that, right? So I guess you can think about it from a public investment standpoint in terms of campus infrastructure, fewer students, right? The classrooms don't get updated as often, don't get painted as often, that sort of kind of thing.
In another, I mean, I guess that relates to a con I didn't mention, and it's not really brought up as much. But if you're asking me, what are the costs of this? In my mind, I'm like, what would the perfect, I don't know about perfect, but what would a much better system be? It would be literally there was, the public schools aren't there like 50 years from now. And there's all sorts of private schools. You have to send your kid to one. Some of them are cost lower than the voucher costs. Others aren't. And maybe you have to pay a little bit more. And it's a free market. It's a market system. I think market systems are good. To me, that would be like this wonderful world that we could be in. I think everybody'd be a bit happier.